Well, 4 people in Louisiana have been arrested as a result of Operation Restore Justice, which, according to the FBI, New Orleans is an initiative to arrest child predators. The operation took place nationally during Child Abuse Prevention Month and efforted the arrest of 205 suspects across the U.S. 115 children were reportedly rescued as a result of the operation. 3 of the suspects arrested in Louisiana were charged in connection to a joint operation by the FBI, Alexandria Police, and Louisiana State Police. And 2 of those suspects face state charges and will be prosecuted by the Rapides Parish District Attorney. We spoke to the Rapides Parish DA about the operation and the suspects his office will be prosecuting.
Is this a sign that Cenla is seeing more federal partnerships or collaboration on this?
Yes, it is, and it's also a sign that that, in my opinion, that people in Louisiana and central Louisiana are fed up with crime.